I'm Indra,
And I'm Amanda.
and we'd like to welcome you to The Messy Middle Matters. Hey, Amanda, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Indra?
I'm doing well. Today, we're having one of those episodes where we're going to start with definitions because, one of the things that we hold true, it's from our episode 2, is that words matter, and having shared understanding of words matters more than anything. So, a few words for everybody who's listening. So, we're going to be talking about intrinsic incentives, extrinsic incentives, and outputs, and the intersection of those three. So intrinsic incentives, those are the internal motivators, the things that drive us because they feel meaningful, satisfying, or aligned with who we are. It's the fulfillment you get from solving a complex problem, helping a teammate, or doing work that reflects your values, even when no one's watching. Extrinsic incentives are the external motivators, things like money, promotions, praise, or avoiding punishment. They're about what you get or avoid from the outside world in exchange for your effort. Last one is outputs. Those are the tangible things that a person or team produces, the visible results of their work. That could be a project plan, a code commit, a campaign launch, a workshop you delivered, a customer ticket that got resolved. It's the what in what you create and when you complete it. So those are our words for the day. And, the reason that we're talking about this today is one of the biggest challenges at work is when, those three are not aligned with each other. It was briefly mentioned in our episode between the natural tension between professional growth and teams, team loyalty, and those types of things, right? And team cohesion. But this is so prevalent across, any company that I've been a part of. So today we'll focus on two areas. One is the misalignment of incentives between departments, crafts, or teams. And the other one is the disconnects between what leaders say and what they value and what they ask people to do. So we got a whole lot of stuff there. So I just gave a little bit of just an outline of the framework of what we're going to be talking about today. But Amanda, I'm positive you're having a reaction as I was reading those words. I was feeling the reaction in myself too.
I feel like this could get a little spicy. Like
Good.
the topic screams conflict or misalignment or like a failure in quotes to collaborate, or that things just aren't meshing, right? Things aren't meshing and there's tension.
Yeah, exactly. And that tension you may be conscious of it. You might not be conscious of it. Like there's lots of different ways that this manifests. So let's talk about like the easier one. It's smaller. It's easier to address. It's easier to talk about and it's easier to address, which is the misalignment between departments or disalignment between teams or misalignment between crafts. Like I've got a perfect story. So I was leading a UX design team. And I had a member of my team who had this really great idea on how she wanted the design to proceed. And there were all these really good reasons as to why her idea was valid. And she came to me, she's like flustered and flummoxed and just beside herself. She's like, I was talking to the software engineer and I told them what I wanted to do and they didn't want to do it. And she's like, how could they? Like as if it was some sort of moral deficit on their part that they didn't see her point, right? And I said to her, hey, let's pause a second. So at that company that I was working at, we were getting paid quarterly bonuses. So everyone was very conscious of what they were getting measured on all the time. And I said to her, have you thought about what he gets measured on for his quarterly bonus? She goes, no, I haven't. I said, oh, okay, great. Let's I don't know either because I'm not in their department, but let's play pretend. Let's play pretend and let me hypothesize that he is going to get partially rewarded on the number of stories that he delivers using the Agile framework, the number of things that he's delivered. He is going to be incentivized on, number of releases to production. He's going to be incentivized on the lack of defects in his code, right? Like, let's just go with those three. I said, do you see how your idea could be getting in the way of him hitting his quarterly targets and getting his quarterly bonus? And she goes, oh, Like, all right, all right. So now let's come up with a plan. Let's come up with a plan to get what you want and not mess with his bag, right?
Yeah, I think it's yet another example of like take a step back, start from an empathetic place, right? Put
Yeah,
yourself in that person's shoes, and maybe it'll click and make sense.
100%. And like in the workplace, it's so funny. And I've cut my teeth, or I've spent an awful lot of time with either software engineers or UX designers and those the associated crafts. And so like in either of those fields, it's remarkably it's striking how often either one of those sets of folks would say the user would want, or like all this empathy for the user, which may or may not be accurate, but let's assume for the sake of argument that it's accurate, right? They have all this empathy for the user, but forget to apply that same kind of thinking for their colleagues. It's wacky.
Yeah, it is. As you were telling that story, another example that came to my mind was and I've seen this, I think, at every company that I've worked with or worked at. The tension between the customer support team and the engineering team.
Yes.
The customer support team is usually measured on how many tickets are resolved, how fast they're resolved. Like a customer, writes in and says, "Hey, I found a bug, I found a defect, something's not working. Can you fix it?" And it's usually on like up to the engineering team to go fix that thing. But the
It's so
engineering
true.
team has their set of priorities and they're just like, well, I've already been told that like these are my top 10. Sorry, your customer defect isn't on that. I'm not working on it.
Well, you're talking about extrinsic incentives of what people get measured on. I'll give you an intrinsic one that goes with that same type of thing. Call volume. Call volume. If
Mm-hmm.
you're in a large company or even a small company, if your customer support team gets a flood of call volume from a release and they're not ready for it, they were not briefed on it, they don't have the talking points on it, they weren't like they're not ready to cope with that incoming feedback, right?
Mm-hmm.
Rightful or not, right? Because people don't like change, let's be honest. But you know, if you don't deal with that, you've got a different kind of conflict where intrinsic and extrinsic, they just don't want to have a headache all day long.
Oh,
Those
right.
poor
They don't
call
want a
center
headache.
folks.
They don't want to get burnt out.
No,
They don't want to talk to this many customers a day.
no, I mean they do, but not when they're all seething at them. Like,
Right.
okay, let me tell you. I mean, so I mean, I think that in those scenarios, I think it's so important to. And I gave a talk on this years ago. And it's so funny. I actually just found it online again. Like it's behind a paywall. I'm like, I will figure out how to make. I might make it an episode so that we can. I'll revisit the talk. Um, but it's about understanding somebody else's motivations, understanding somebody else's origin stories, understanding, who they are, like what are they jazzed about? What are they jazzed about? And when you understand that, and you also try and understand, because you never will really know what hits their pocketbook, like, or
Uh-huh.
what impacts their pocketbook. If you try and keep those two things in mind when you're working with somebody else, or try and help them understand yours, you're in a much better place.
Yeah. And then it's putting that on the table, right? And like assessing it
Yeah.
and being able to, oh, like now that I know or can assume
Yeah.
this is what everyone's incentives are, then you can like you'll realize, oh, where is the misalignment? Is the misalignment between us? Is the misalignment between like what's important to us? Is the misalignment between us and what leadership is telling us? Like where is the friction point?
Yeah. And I know you have a lot of experience with this one. Like one of the, or some of the teams that have the most friction with everyone in an organization: legal, compliance, infosec, anybody who's
Mm-hmm.
trying to keep the company safe and out of litigation and physically stable, technically stable.
Right.
like
The more like operational pieces of the
yes.
organization. Yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm like, I just think about like, so for me, I think I've had more experience with like the legal and compliance side. I think that you've had more experience with like the security teams. Like in this, that like
Yes.
engineering wants to do X, whether it's pushing code, getting a piece of software, whatever it might be. Like,
And right. And a lot of engineering teams don't have security, don't have the security team and the security team's requirements top of mind. I'm not saying that engineering teams are like, no, screw security.
no, they're not, because they don't want to get woken up at 2 o'clock in the morning when there's a security breach. Like, they don't want that.
Right. But it's not the most top of mind
No.
especially when you're trying to ship something fast.
Right. And your product person is like, I have to, you have to, or else, rah, 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 the sky is falling. Like, and security is like, you're going to bring down the whole infrastructure in the process, right?
Right. Like, has anybody taken a look at what you're trying to do and assess the security risk of this new product or feature?
Yeah.
And sometimes the answer is no. And then like everybody gets upset because it's a slowdown, right?
Well, but what they don't realize is that if you're proactive and you're slow down, and I know you know this, if you slow down and are proactive in those conversations, you have them early or you have them strategically, or you build those relationships so that when something comes from like from left field and you need to do it right away, you know that there's a fair bit of risk to it. You can get that conversation moving a lot more quickly. So it's the slow down to speed up kind of thing. Like, you got to slow down, build the foundation, whether it's for that particular project or for just like that more durable relationship overall, so that you can start flowing things through and bring them into the process at the right times. Like, they don't want to stop you because that gives them a headache. They don't want to hear you're griping the same way a call center doesn't want to hear a customer's griping.
Right. That's their intrinsic motivation.
Right? Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
they don't want to argue with you. No, it's not great. They You said the slow down to speed up.
Yeah.
The number of times I've said that in my career.
I might
of
need to
just
create
like,
a sticker for that too. Slow down to speed up.
yeah, slow down to speed up, right? Like, you're taking a step back, you're assessing, you're assessing the processes and frameworks and relationships and like getting everyone on the same page so that when something does break later on, you don't have to waste valuable minutes explaining the thing.
100%. And or when you do have to mess with somebody's intrinsic or extrinsic motivators, whichever they are,
Mm-hmm.
you can have that post-mortem. I hate that phrase. Sorry. I'm
Yeah.
cringing at myself a little bit. But like after the thing has happened, because you had to do it and there was just like there was no way around it and you had to do it quickly. Afterwards, you have to have that conversation to say, hey, I acknowledge that my actions messed with your intrinsic or your extrinsic motivators, or, and that's just like a really important thing. So let's go on to the harder one, which is kind of where we get into the outputs kind of thing. So we're touching against outputs on this one, but like the bigger, it's not, yeah, to me it's bigger because it's like the scale of it is usually bigger. It's usually organization wide. And it's politically stickier, is the misalignment between the words that leadership says and the actions that they take in the heat of the moment.
Uh-huh.
I can go first. Kevin knows I'm not lots of words, but yeah.
Yeah, it is stickier. It is a little more politically political. What comes to mind is, and I think you and I have talked about how this could be its own episode. So I'll just touch upon it and then I'll walk away. Company values, right? You can say the company can say that the company values include like sustainability and like technical excellence,
work-life balance.
But if bonuses, like the extrinsic incentives, are tied to quarterly revenue,
right?
What's the real priority here?
Right. And no, I think this is worth going into because we're talking not just about, I'm going to go into it in a second, but it's about the incentives of leadership. Like, what does leadership get measured and rewarded on versus what do their team members get measured or more than one. And that's also when there's a disconnect between those two, like extrinsic and extrinsic, then there's a whole nother set of problems. But like the one that comes to mind for me that I think will be familiar to a lot of people is innovation teams. Innovation, we're going to have a blue sky project. We're going to rethink X, Y, and Z and blah, 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 blah. Every single time a next gen, and I know that's another set phrase that will set off like for a lot of people. Because I don't know who hasn't been touched by one of those in their career. It's a .com phrase that I wish that would just CNN. But whenever there's like this new blue sky project that comes out and everyone gets so excited and it gets everybody energized and they show it at town halls and like, yeah, we're going to be different. We're going to disrupt, blah, 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 blah. And they'll come out with this vision and they'll come out with the whole thing and the prototype and whatever. And then when the rubber hits the road, it's about bug fixes. It's about not being able to migrate the code base for X, Y, and Z reasons. And you're back to business as usual. And like that is so disorienting. It's such a scale for anybody who bought into that vision.
Yeah. When you're talking about like the vision, I just imagine like innovation with like jazz hands, right? It's next gen, it's innovative. And yeah, like I'm trying to think of how like the different ways different companies that I've worked with, different teams have tried to prioritize innovation. And you're right, at the end of the day, it usually just falls back into business as usual, keeping the lights on, just ensuring that we have a stable product as opposed to like the most innovative product.
And it has to. And it has, like, let's be very honest. Whenever, just in case this is useful for anyone who's in a leadership role, or even if you're talking to your peers, whenever anybody gets demoralized in those scenarios, I'm like, I hear you. I totally understand your frustration. I like to get paid. And I know you like to get paid too. And I know that that's like not the most satisfying answer on earth, but that's the answer. So we're going to have to worry about that. We need to keep the lights on. We need to keep the money flowing. And then let's figure out how we can carve out enough time or energy or how we can like strategically pull in as much as we can from this vision innovation thing into our day-to-day work, right? Like, so like, that's just a little tool and tactic for somebody who's trying to mitigate the despondence that can happen. It's a big word, but I feel like it can get to that level when people are navigating, because it's really really tough. And I've navigated this multiple times. Like actually one of my when I go on interviews, one of my popular things that I talk about is a project like that where like the vision was sold through and then it was like it couldn't deliver. And it's like, how do you reconcile this? And it was all being done in the public eye too. So our clients noticed too. Clients knew that fancy new thing was coming, but how do we do it and still keep it all running and safe and compliant? It's really hard.
It is. And, another tactic for those listening could be to, be tactical about it, right? Like a lot of the squishiness and mismatch and misalignment comes from we're trying to take this overarching vision and actually do something to execute on that vision, right? But we've never talked about how.
Yeah. And I think this is a different episode, but it's reminding me of a particular project that you and I were in. And we were shepherding to move. It took two of us. It took two of us from two different angles to get this group of folks to proceed with speed and agility.
Right. Taking that vision and being able to translate it into a set of steps.
Actionable. Something actionable. Yes. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, something actionable, something like an actual plan that people can follow to start chipping away at achieving this vision.
Yep. Not just some sizzle reel with fancy music and whiz bang effects, right? Something that's like, I break this down this way. Okay, today we're swapping out the logo. Tomorrow we're swapping out the button. We're going to do the microservice on the third release. Like figure out all that stuff, whatever it might be. So,
right. Yeah. Figure it out and figure out just like, what does this mean on a day-to-day basis, right?
On a day-to-day basis.
Does this mean, a lot of a lot of teams try the 20% innovative time. But it's like,
Directionally, I agree with that. Like, or like conceptually, I agree with that. But
yes, but like, what does that actually mean? What 20% of what? Right.
and when and
And when?
how and all that. Because, it's another way that this shows up in places, and I have multiple workplace examples of this is, let's say you have had all those conversations, you are reconciled, you're figuring out how to achieve this vision and quote keep the lights on, like, and how to make sure that people don't get burnt out on one set of work or another work, and you're cooking with gas, and you're running like a well-oiled machine, and then a high value client or customer comes in and said, "Hey, I know that your entire site is designed for people who love the color blue, but I want it to be green. I know your entire site is developed for portrait and I want it to be landscape," or whatever. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out two extreme, just hypothetical examples. And then the tailspin that happens when high value client often talks to the CEO or the president or somebody on the executive team, and that said person on the executive team who may or may not understand what it takes to get things done says, high value client says they're going to leave, we need to get this done next week.
We need to get this done yesterday.
Yesterday. And then you're like, but the core values say work-life balance. The core values say we're focusing on things and we're not going to get distracted. Right? The core values say, oh.
Right. Right. The core values say, and our plan says, and our quarterly, like, are you just throwing that all out the window? Yes. Yes, you are for this high value client that when they say jump, you say how high.
And it's hot. It's so, let's take this from like the leadership perspective. Like I'm going to call it the mid leadership. It's the messy middle matters for mid-level leaders. Hello. Not to say that others aren't welcome, but I think that y'all are part of our sweet spot. You're not the only people in our sweet spot, but if you are in that middle and it cascades down to you from your VP or your director, depending on where you're landing, like, how do you cope? I mean, I think that this is where I do the slow down to speed up. It might mean an extra like few hours that day where I stay late to figure it out. So the next day I can start running, because I can't really slow the thing down because that will cause even more chaos. And that's, mess is one thing, chaos is another. I come up with a plan to figure out what are they asking for? What's reasonably achievable, right? You're going to have to, you cannot proceed with your original plan as you had. Like, that's the reality. You need to accept that. But like, what can you incorporate? How can you incorporate it? And how can you do it in a way that's disruptive to the least amount of people? Like, that to me is usually how I think about it when this mandate from, I always call it an executive mandate. Like, the executive mandate comes down and lands in your lap. You're like, okay. And then how you're going to communicate to your team. Like, how are you going to tell them, hey, guess what? Things are not going to go the way we wanted them to, but we're going to get through this together.
Right. But we're going to get through this together. And I think it's also using your management clout, right, position to, okay, we're going to get through this together. And then when we get through this, how do we figure out a way to avoid this from happening again?
I don't know if you can do that. I'll be honest. I don't know how easy it is to.
Oh, it's not easy.
I would say I'd say it's probably more possible to happen less often.
Okay, yeah, you're right. Not never again. I know that's very wishful, hopeful. Yes,
less often with less emergency sirens going on.
Yeah,
like, hey, and that's where the managing up comes up. Like, hey, we did this for you. How do we get this so that it's less disruptive next time?
Right.
And I would say also you need to find a way to make good by your team that had to just eat crow and just, maybe that's not the right metaphor, but like, just suck it up and do the thing that they didn't necessarily want to do. Like that could be a happy hour, that could be a, whatever it might be. It might come out of your own personal pocket if you're a leader. Sometimes that is part of what some of us do, like, but find a work could be, you can do also no cost ways, which is another episode probably. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, figure out what incentivizes your team, right? Like what their incentives are and what would make them happy.
What's their release valve, right? Which is a different
Mhm.
version of an incentive, So I think we covered a lot of good ground there. I think we covered a lot of good ground. So, okay, so it's important for us to understand each other's intrinsic, extrinsic incentives and understood what outputs people are being measured on, which ties to the extrinsic incentives, but understanding that. It's important to lay groundwork and build durable relationships to help support the difficult conversations. And it's important to have the conversations at the moment when you recognize those disconnects so that you can navigate through that complexity together. And it's not like where one side always wins and the other one doesn't. Any other things that I missed?
No, I think that was a very eloquent way to just like sum it up, wrap it up.
Sometimes I'm long on the words. Sometimes I get it right. All right. Awesome. Yeah. Well, thank you, Amanda, for an awesome conversation. And thank you to everyone who listened. I hope you guys got something good out of it. And I hope that you join us next time when we cover another topic from the messy middle. Bye, everyone. Bye. Thanks for taking time with us in the messy middle. Word of mouth remains the most powerful way for people to find us. If this episode sparked something for you, we'd love it if you'd subscribe to the podcast on your favorite app, download a few episodes, and share it with someone else who's navigating the in-between. Do you have ideas for future episodes or topics you'd like us to explore? You can find our feedback form at themessymiddlematters.com or in the show notes. Thank you for joining us on this journey. This work is better when we do it together. Until next time.